Churchill once stated that the fascists of the future will be called anti-fascists. And this was his infamous criticism of the left wing. The framework for this critique will therefore be on the whole notion of the conception of white, and this rather dangerous mind virus that we encounter in the status quo, known as racism and whiteness. The negation have not provided any warrants for the existence, eminently, or in the past, of white supremacy. The concept of white supremacy is fascistic in origin. Its nature was rooted in Hegelian thought in Germany. The same philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who influenced Marx, also influenced the Nazis. And Hegel was distinct from his contemporaries, his predecessors, and many who followed him, because he was an idealist who believed that history is a march of progress. The Nazi concept of white supremacy is rooted in this notion of a march of progress to an ideal state where the Aryan race dominates. The notions of Aryan race are astrological in origin. They're based on the fact that Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. It corresponds with Mars, the god of war. And it's been a long-standing tradition over the course of Western history, and Eastern history as well, because this has also pervaded places like Iran, which is named after Aryan, and India, to regard the expression Aryan as meaning that which leads, in the same way as Aries leads the zodiac and Mars leads people to war. It's no surprise, therefore, that Aries is a ram, which rams ahead. These symbols, along with the Hindu sign of peace, the swastika, were manipulated by fascists in the first half of the 20th century. In conjunction with German idealism, in order to create the notion of white supremacy, the notion that the spiritual elite, who were described as having a white spiritual aura, would be recognized by outward characteristics. This is a clearly unintellectual bastardization, popularized in a very, very unstable and uneducated political climate, much like the kind that we have here. But there was never any evidence of the existence of this ideal state for which they were striving beforehand. The Nazis were not interested in perpetuating the institutions of the Western world. They were trying to overthrow them. Sure, they might have taken a few cues from the United States and other countries, but their main concern was not that way of perpetuating white supremacy, but that of establishing it. And it was precisely because it was believed that this idealized Hegelian state had not yet come into being. It was precisely for this reason that they gained in popularity so quickly. Because as we all know, it's much easier to get people riled up if action must be taken now to remedy a problem than it is to defend the status quo. Sure, many political conservatives are totally adamant about keeping things the way they are, but they're never characterized with the same kind of aggression as someone who feels that the best of all possible worlds is just around the corner, and the only alternative to it is hell. Our opponent's rhetoric can only reflect an individual bias. And while this may appear to be an ad hominem attack, it is no less of an ad hominem attack than the nature of what they are saying. The civilized individual is capable of seeing human beings through the lens of what Martin Buber called the thou. Capable of seeing past arbitrary, artificial distinctions created under a fascistic paradigm, and seeing a human being as an extension of oneself, noting the kinships between this human being and oneself, as well as some of the differences. But this will always be in an individuated fashion. However, an individual with no love for human beings in his heart, or her heart, will tend to see them as objects. And the thing that we tend to do with objects is we tend to categorize them. Yet there is never, what we have to establish is that there is no such thing as a white person, unless that person so chooses to self-identify. I myself have been labeled as being white, but having grown tired of it, I decided that when I was going to sign up for college, I'd sign up for it as Asian American, which is true. I come from Moscow, Russia, and even though I come from the European part of Russia, there is no denying that that country is not only predominantly dominated by Asia, but actually predominantly dominates Asia. I am, practically speaking, and in many regards, Asian. In fact, a man of Asian descent, specifically Asian descent, whom I met by the name of Lee, once seeing my father, remarked, "He looks Asian." And this is something I can't really dispute. The similarities are there. But, because of the other side of my family, the Jewish side, the Asian features don't appear as much. But note that both of those categories, just in my situation, are fit what we call minority groups. A minority group is actually the only kind of group that there is. As Gilles Deleuze demonstrated in his work with Felix Guattari over the years, every individual, at the moment that that individual becomes something new, becomes a minority, because the only way to distinguish one culture from another is in terms of language, not melanin, not sensory perception. These 19th century ways of valuing empirical facts above all else and categorizing the world taxonomically is outdated. In fact, there's this same threat of categorizing things taxonomically just because it's convenient for the census, for the statistician's office, all based on basically the factory system and on consumerism. This was the threat that Aldous Huxley warned us all against. But it's really obvious, isn't it? That what one person's conception of white is differs from someone else's. Because all of us are of what could be called mixed heritage. There's also no reason to presuppose that my prejudices will in any way reflect those of my opponent, nor my partner, nor that my partner's prejudices will reflect those of our opponents, or of the judge. And why is that? Because we're not just the sum of our environments, we're also the sum of the decisions that we make in the absence of a definite guiding post. And in a society that is essentially, and always will be, one should hope, a cultural melting pot, where it's impossible anymore to appeal to the authority of just one way of doing things. So for all of these reasons, the fact that white supremacy was thankfully never actually attained, that it was a misunderstood concept based on other concepts which were in turn misunderstood, and the fact that our opponents don't have any epistemological ground because they can't prove the existence of an objective whiteness, we win this round today.